Hello, everybody. Constitution Radio here, and I was just talking. Good to see you. I was just talking to Alan, who's on the air with me. I still haven't figured out yet how to do our. I know how to. I haven't done the work to get it to seamlessly play and intros and outros and make it more radio, and give you guys the breaks at the bottom of the hour and the top of the hour and all that jazz. So commercial breaks, so that you can get a chance to walk away or something. So we'll get there. But because remember, I'm a radio guy. I've spent 15 years on AM and FM radio, and now all of it is right here on. Oh wow, okay. See, I even got my phone in front of me. Everything. It's all on YouTube and Rumble now. Rumble.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, YouTube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, or just go to DouglasVGibbs.com, right there if you're watching the screen, DouglasVGibbs.com. Now, the reason why my phone was important there for a second is it's also communicating with Idaho. So for those of you who have always said to yourself, gosh, I miss seeing Doug as a speaker, or I've never had a chance to see Doug as a speaker, the opportunity's coming up in September. 17th, 18th, and 19th, Constitutional Week, and an event in the Boise, Idaho area, Meridian. It's like 20 minutes from Boise. The Constitutional Week. And now I've done these Constitutional Week events before, but typically in Lake Havasu. This one is in Boise, Idaho. It's in my neck of the woods, Pacific Northwest. And I am going to be the keynote speaker. And it is still in the development phase. So I don't have details. I don't have a time. I don't have what building, what address, any of that. But I do know in the evening on Thursday, the 17th, right? 17th, yeah. Friday, the 18th, and Saturday, the 19th, will be in the afternoon. So Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday afternoon. We've got all kinds. The organizer, should I say, has all kinds of things planned. And so if you're like, what the heck, road trip, let's go to Boise and see Doug. I would love to see you there. And I've got some former students in southern Idaho. So I sent them a message. Hey, come on up. A few other people. I've got matter of fact, I've got a couple who's a longtime student, fan, follower, whatever you want to call it, from the Beaumont area, Beaumont, California, who travels the country in their RV, and they might be up there in Boise. And of course, plenty of people from the Boise area. I would like you to be there as well. So just mark your calendar that you want to get to Boise, Idaho during Constitutional Week, at least Saturday, the 19th, at least. That's going to be the main presentation. Thursday will be a meet and greet and Q&A session. Friday will be designed like a Constitution class. And then on Saturday, I'm going to give a presentation regarding what it will take to maintain our republic. So the keys to restoring our republic really is, I think, the title of it. So hope you guys can make it out there to Boise, Idaho, those of you who appreciate what I do. I am on the air quite a bit. I at DouglasVGibbs.com/radio. You could check out my schedule. I still need to change the schedule to say that this show is now only on Rumble and YouTube. It still says KMET. KMET, the last show was on July 4th. I have with me Alan Myers, and Dennis Jackson has made it. Oh, Dennis, you're in the house. So you got to figure it out, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well then, yes. This new phone I took in, and explained my problem, and they hit all these little buttons like Sean would over at KMET, and they said it would work, and it
did.
And here I am. So,
so
I feel like I'm finally home again.
Yeah, this is the first time that all three of us are together again since KMET on this. I've done a couple episodes by myself, one with just Alan and I. And so I'm glad you're here, Dennis. So we got Dennis, the voice, Jackson, Alan Myers. Alan, glad you're here. The brick wall that you are. Welcome back, sir.
Yes, I am solid.
Yeah, and folks, for those of you watching, when I say brick wall, see now when I bring up all the imagery, see I'm the only one with my image. Then we've got Dennis with it's a I don't know logo of a person, and then a generic, and then the brick wall. It's like talking to a wall. But anyway, so if you wonder why you can't see the other co-host or guest or whatever you want to call them, that's why. But anyway, so I'm glad you're here, everybody, and I'm glad you are audience here. Let's start with, and once again, remember, folks, I'm a radio guy, and I think I've said this on other episodes. As a radio guy, you're not going to get short videos out of me. Now, I'm working on figuring out how I want to do a few short videos here and there because I probably lose quite a bit of audience because I am, for lack of a better way of saying it, long-winded. But I'm a radio guy. This is what I'm used to. I'm used to doing hour-long, 2-hour-long shows. And for some people, that's what they want. They want the whole caboodle. Some people are like, yeah, dude, that's way too long. Give me 5 minutes and I'm done and I'm out of there. I'm working on that. We'll get there. But here's the thing. As a constitutionalist, as originalist, there's so much to talk about. Can you really talk about it in 5 minutes? Is it even possible to spit out? Now, War Hamster, Brady the War Hamster, I'm very careful. If I say his name often enough, he may start appearing or something. It's like Beetlejuice. You say his name too often, he suddenly appears out of nowhere. But he is able to do the short-winded things. He used to do like these what are those things called? These blackboards, I think they were called, or something like that, where people gather and it'd be a quick little whatever, sort of like a Twitter post, right? And he's really good at that stuff.
A vignette.
I'm sorry.
You looking for the word like a vignette?
No, that's not the word I'm looking for. There's a word for it. I just can't remember. So Rick Crippen, which is a student down in the Temecula area, had just joined in and on the chat, and he's watching on Rumble, and he says it's 104 degrees here today, so enjoy the coast today. Yeah, I was gonna joke around with I looked up Murrieta where I used to live. It's gonna be 96 today. And I was thinking about calling a couple of my friends down there and say, yeah, man, it's a real hot one today. We got all the way up to 71. But
well, I just got out of my car. I just got back in to get on the radio show, and it was 100.
Wow.
That was 15 minutes ago here in Hesperia.
Well, Alan, you're in the San Diego area, and you're what, probably 80?
Maybe mid-70s? Well, the high today in coastal is supposed to be 78.
Don't ask Alan anything to do with weather.
Yeah, well, he's close to the coast in the San Diego area.
Yeah, so, I know.
So he is in one of the better, cooler climates. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about something that's even crazier.
Well, let me ask Alan a real quick personal question. How far are you from Chula Vista?
Far enough.
Probably 30 miles.
I'm going to say via freeway 30 minutes.
Okay, well, that's what I was guessing. Okay, yeah. Very good. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, this is one of the things I love about this group is we all know each other. We're friends, but we also understand the Constitution. We understand politics. We're very conservative. So if you are a person who wants to hammer me about what I believe, rather than be a troll in the chat room, send me a message at Ask Doug. Go to douglasvgibbs.com. There's an Ask Doug link in the link bar. Communicate with me that way. If you want to email me, it's a good way to communicate with me. As always, I appreciate and love to see folks in the chat room. Let's talk about something though crazier than all this weather. The heat of summer. So it's not crazy. I mean, it's just where I live now. We get those, and don't get me wrong, we get those warm days. We get, last year we had, I'm turning to my wife here. Last year we had 4 or 5 days that where it did get real high. It was in 100, right?
Yes.
It's what's called the Chetko effect. The wind shifts in the opposite direction. Instead of drawing from the ocean, it draws from the inland.
Yes.
And so it's drawing air from Eastern Oregon, gets real hot. But then the next day it's 65. Because, so, it doesn't linger for like, week after week after week. Anyway, so let's talk about Joe Biden. So Joe Biden's legal battle, so there was audio recordings of him and his ghostwriter. I was talking to my wife yesterday about this on another program on Patriot Soapbox, and most people are not writers. I can sit and I can put my thoughts down. If anything, I'm probably better at writing than I am at speaking. I'm a much better author than I am a radio host, in my own opinion. My wife, when she was in college, she's numbers, man. I mean, she got into statistics and, all these tough math classes, man, no problem. I couldn't help her anyway. But when it came to classes where she needed to write like a paper or something, Doug, can you help me? And for lack of a better way of saying it, boy, did she need my help. And most people are that way. Most people, they have two weaknesses. They're not really great at writing their thoughts down, and they are not very good at speaking in front of a public speaking. And in fact, that's one of the greatest, if not the greatest fear of most people, is speaking in front of a crowd. And so sometimes we forget these things. And then we hear about these pundits like, Hannity and Jesse Waters and Gutfeld and Rush Limbaugh and, these political people like, Kamala or Obama or Biden, and they say, oh, I wrote a book. No, you didn't. You couldn't write your way out of a paper bag. What you did is you told a ghostwriter your thoughts, and they wrote the book. And that's what I explain that so that we understand what these audio sessions are, these audio recordings. And this is a time that Joe Biden spent during the tail end of 2016, the beginning of 2017, ghostwriter sessions, because, he's got a book he wants to put out. And there's about 70 hours of audio, over 100 pages of transcripts that were created with him working with his ghostwriter, Mark Zwanitzer, and on his memoir that he wanted to write. And once again, Biden's not going to write it, especially now. And so you got these recordings, and it's just Biden and his ghostwriter. So Biden is probably disarmed quite a bit. He's relaxing a little more. He's being a little more honest, right? This is a safe place, so to speak. And so he probably said things that he maybe shouldn't have if it were to get out in public, but he's not worried. It's him and his ghostwriter. And so then after his inability to keep his mental faculties straight during his presidency, people began to say, well, when did this start? When did he start having these issues? And also, where is there evidence over some of these things that we think he did wrongdoing, like classified files, things like that? And so now then focus began to point towards these recordings. And there were requests by committees in Congress, certain Republicans, that these recordings be made available so they could be perused, so they could be scrutinized for these reasons. And the Biden team, the Biden family, the Biden world launched legal battle against it. They wanted to suppress these audio recordings, make sure they didn't get out there. And so when I explained this to my wife yesterday, she says, well, does he have something to hide? Typically, that's the first thing you think of when someone's trying to suppress it. They don't want something to be out there that they may, that they talked about. It isn't just about your personal life. And I get it. People have their personal life. They don't want certain personal things out there, not because they want to hide it, but because it's nobody's business. But that's not what this is. And so Virginia, my wife's like, well, does he have something to hide? And now these recordings, the legal battle to try to suppress them has failed. The Joe Biden legal team finally backed off because there was court cases that went against them. And now Congress The Department of Justice has it's called the Oversight Project. They have these recordings, and they've been gone through. They've been gone through over and over, and they contain multiple instances of Biden acknowledging that he was handling classified information and even sharing it with his unauthorized ghostwriter. And there's cases of him having some mental lapses. In the recordings, at one point, he says, "I just found all the classified stuff downstairs." This is in a February 2017 recording. In another, he warns, the next thing I have here, this is classified. And perhaps most incriminatingly, Biden explicitly states at one point, some of this may be classified, so be careful. I'm not sure. It's not marked classified, but these acknowledgments directly contradict any claims of inadvertent mishandling. And Biden at one point boasted officials never knew he had them. So he knew he had classified. This is not, because what we were led to believe before was, well, he didn't realize it was classified. He just collected some files. And some of these sensitive records were found by investigators in his garage, offices, basement den. Special counsel Robert Hur obtained the recordings during his investigation into Biden's mishandling of classified documents, but declined to prosecute. He said that the jury would view Biden with sympathy because he was a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, unquote. Now realize something. These recordings took place 7 years before Special Counsel Hur made that conclusion. And Special Counsel Hur made that conclusion before Biden's official presidential time in office and us going, there might be a few screws loose there. So this oversight project, which obtained the recordings through a Freedom of Information Act request after years of legal battles, noted that the silence of the redactions loudly demonstrates that Biden knowingly and willfully disclosed classified information to his ghostwriter. The extent of these disclosures was apparently far greater than Special Counsel Robert Hur previously indicated in his investigation. Perhaps equally concerning are the multiple instances of cognitive lapses captured in the recordings. Years before Biden launched his 2020 presidential campaign, at various points, Biden struggles to remember details, loses his train of thought, and requires assistance from his ghostwriter to reconstruct past events. Now, I get it. We all do that a little bit. I mean, on this program, I'll sit here and go, okay, what was that word? I was doing that earlier. That happens. Maybe I do it more now that I'm older. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about some serious lapses here. Biden was unfit for office, and these tapes reveal it. The Democratic Party was corrupt about Biden before, during, and since his presidency, and did everything they could to cover it up. And then they targeted Trump and raided Mar-a-Lago. They projected, the hypocrisy of that, of the Justice Department's handling of classified document cases is glaring. While Jack Smith aggressively pursued Donald Trump for similar allegations with no evidence, the department initially protected Biden by fighting to keep these recordings sealed. The release comes only after Biden dropped his legal challenges following unfavorable court rulings, as I said a moment ago. And these tapes also raise serious questions about why Special Counsel Hur declined to prosecute despite evidence of willful mishandling of classified information. Merrick Garland's Department of Justice released a sanitized version of these transcripts in 2024, but the actual audio was never handed over. And now that they are available, they reveal that Joe Biden was untruthful, mentally imbalanced, and they serve as an indictment against the deep state that protected him. These recordings now face full congressional scrutiny, and Congress must confront the evidence they contain that a former vice president and future president knowingly disclosed classified information to an authorized individual and demonstrated cognitive impairment years before his presidential campaign. The American public deserves answers about how someone with these documented issues was allowed to ascend to the presidency and who participated in concealing this information from voters. The Biden administration's attempts to frame this as weaponizing the DOJ for political retribution ring hollow when confronted with Biden's own words acknowledging the classified nature of the materials he was sharing. These tapes represent not just a breach of national security protocols, but a profound betrayal of public trust that demands accountability from all involved. Now, let me say something else real quick here. We kind of knew about this stuff way back. We saw it. We knew, you and I, right? Listeners, most of you understood. They saw this coming. And some people get very, very impatient. So, well, these people should be behind. I agree. It should be behind bars. But and the reality is processes have to be followed. Protocols, gathering evidence, all the things that go along with it. And sometimes our patient runs thin. Now, that said, I want to correct myself. Earlier, I said Rick was on Rumble. He was actually on YouTube. And he is on YouTube, listening over at youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs. Where we go we go all GTG is in on the Rumble and has posted a comment. And Devil Dog is over there at YouTube. Good to see you, brother. Hope all is well. I am doing well. And another person at YouTube, Michelle. Hypocrisy is a perfect word for it. Absolutely. So now I mentioned those people out there, and I'm sure you in the audience, some of you are among them, are kind of impatient about this. Why is it taking so long? Why aren't there handcuffs being handed out? Why isn't the orange jumpsuit factory pumping out orange jumpsuits at breakneck speed? Because there's so many criminals. This deep state. This is the process. It takes time. This is the reality. And I say all of that because I know who's speaking next. Dennis Jackson. And let me frame this real quick, Dennis, before you come on board. And he's going to turn on the camera, so I'll bring you up, sir, if you want to be on. We've always joked about him. He's the vulture on the cactus. There's two vultures, right? They're on a cactus. And one vulture says the other, because remember, vultures eat carrion, right? They got to wait till something dies. And Dennis is the vulture that says to the other vulture, the hell with patience. Let's go kill something. And so I say the thing about patience with Dennis in mind, because I know Dennis's feelings here about this, but I am on the edge of my seat waiting to hear what you got to say, sir, about this. So Dennis, what's your thoughts?
Well, I knew when you were using the patience, I was thinking you ought to have the picture mounted behind you on the wall, so it's sitting there and they could see the two vultures. I know you've got that
Somewhere,
picture. Yeah. I can send it to you again. But I mean, there's due process, and then there's delay process. And that's what you got. I mean.
Well, Devil Dog in the chat room says exactly that. Everyone deserves due process, and I get that.
Well, you like to golf, right? You like to fish, right? Mm-hmm. All right. If you want to go play 18 holes, how long does it take you to play it?
Yeah, it depends on how well I'm playing, but it could take at least a couple hours.
All right. If you played one hole a day, how long would it take you?
It'd take 18 days.
Yeah, and that's what due process is. It's scheduled. Due process is so and so needs to review this and sign it before I can do the next step. Well, so and so takes 5 months to sign it. They're following due process, but it's a bunch of malarkey. It's a slowdown. I mean, when you have Trump assassination attempt in Butler, and CNN has never carried the hundreds of other meetings that he's been in, and CNN shows up for that one, and a lot of the other ones don't show up for that one. You know, it goes beyond coincidence. You know, there's
Right.
forethought, there's planning, there's expectations. You know, when you arrest Steve Bannon, and you perp walk him, when you know at 5 or 6 in the morning, and the other guys they've done that too, so they can show them being handcuffed and walked out, and 20 police cars on their front yard, even though they've not put up any resistance. They didn't show up with a gun at the door, but they want it on film. And when they do the arrest, the media is there. That's not coincidence. And then when you have a Democrat, when you have Comey, and he gets asked to show up, he's given the opportunity to receive a letter. He's given an opportunity to make an appointment. He's given the opportunity to wear his suit, drive his car, and walk in the government building at 2:00 in the afternoon. He's not perp walked. This is not coincidence. So the fact that you're talking about 2017 recordings, when he did not have immunity, he didn't have anything, and he freely acknowledges. I mean, I remember you and I talked about this stuff back then,
Right.
where he had his Corvette parked in the car or in the garage, and there was classified material in the garage. No door, no lock. Trump at least had the stuff locked up in Mar-a-Lago. He was the president, and he had declassified all of the information that he had at his place when he was the executive. And so he had every legal protection that was ignored, and Biden didn't have any legal protection, and all that was ignored. So, justice is not blind as it should be in this country. And yeah, I would agree when the Republicans are in charge that, maybe that door swings a little bit both ways. I'm not a total ideologue, but to the people that I'm the voice for as a co-host about patience hell, yeah, I'm exactly that guy. If you and I had more authority and more following and more fame, and we had done 1/10 of the stuff that Biden and others have done under their administration, and they had that on us, we'd be in jail or we'd be in court, but we would not be left alone. So Congress is having these conversations now. If I'm a doctor and I see you've got, maybe 3 months to live, I'm not going to schedule you for surgery 9 months from now. And that's what they do. They just schedule it out there, keep kicking it down the alley, with no real intent. And God, in his perfect judgment, looks at the intent of our heart, as well as our thoughts and actions, but the intent of our heart. And their intent is not in finding the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. And they disbarred Hunter Biden. Well, good for him. It's probably past due, but yeah. Don't get me started. I'll be quiet here now, but my feelings about the Durham report.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Very good, sir. Alan. Now let's go to you, Alan, and tell me, Alan, what are your thoughts after hearing what I had to say, what Dennis had to say?
Any specific questions?
Any specific question? Well, about the Biden, all of it. These recordings, and I put the brick wall up so that people know who's talking.
Yeah, well, of course, absolutely. As you've said many times, I have a face made for radio. Okay, looking back, he was VP from 2009 to 2017.
Mhm.
I think you're saying that these recordings began after the end of his time as VP, right?
Right.
Okay. And he's in possession of classified information.
Yes.
Is
And he's
that
admitting it on those
Yeah,
tapes,
but
on those
is that
recordings.
is that okay to do that? I would
No.
think no. I would think no.
Right.
Or there would have had to been somebody who said, yes, you can keep it, but you can't do it yourself once you leave office. Dennis mentioned something about a garage now in the vet. That's a scary thought. Biden in a vet. That just scares me.
Right.
But was this a garage or was this a carport? Because Dennis was saying it had no door.
Yeah, it was a garage.
It is a
It
garage.
wasn't a closet.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. I mean,
Okay. So it's
a room
it's-
is different than a garage.
yes. Which, if you're talking about something that probably is not very secure, is more open to the public or potentially more open to the public than your bedroom closet.
Well, regardless of accessibility, the fact is that those classified files are not supposed to leave wherever they're supposed to be at.
Right. But
You
what
know,
I'm saying,
and when you're no longer vice president, no longer president, even if you are, you're not supposed to be moving them to places where there is risk. I mean, I had a clearance when I was in the military, not because I was anyone important in that sense, but because I would have to go into the rooms of where stuff would be, simply just so I could go into the darn rooms. But this is a big deal. I mean, and going back to what Michelle said in the chat room about the word hypocrisy. I mean, they went after Trump, claiming he had classified information in Mar-a-Lago as they went through Melania's underwear drawer looking for things, and they were looking for anything because their attitude was, well, they'll get eyeballs off of Biden's crimes if they can find crimes that Trump but even though there was no evidence, but it's like, give me the man and I'll find the crime kind of thing. They found nothing. They tried to claim they did. And the hypocrisy is enormous. This guy has all this classified information. They're going to freak out about one, but yet they not only ignore the other, even though there's evidence. Now he's saying he has it in this audio.
Right.
And they're still, well, that was no big thing.
well, a thing is a big thing or it's not a big thing, period. And if you're talking about having classified information in what would be a more publicly accessible room, a garage, as opposed to your bedroom closet, this is showing a lack of respect for the sensitivity of the documents.
Right.
And then,
Total disregard.
well, no, if it was total disregard, it would be outside with the trash cans. But then you have documents that aren't in a secure room or a secure place, even though they're classified. They're in possession of somebody who has left office, which means it's very possible they don't have classified clearance anymore because they're out of the executive branch. And then he's bright enough to know that he has them because he mentions them. And the people in Congress are not up in arms. This is crazy.
Because it's ideology. They don't care. All they care, when I say they, I mean Democrats and DSA and everybody who's pretty much left of Dick Durbin. All they care about is power. That's it. So the truth, embarrassment, knowledge, none of that matters. What does it do for the power of the party or the power of the movement? And it's like, and right now we're, listening to them with the Democratic Socialists, and they say, oh, the Democratic Socialists, they're so communist, or so not. No, they believe the exact same thing as the Democratic Party. They're just saying it. So go ahead.
For me, there's no if, kind of, sort of, maybe. This is all wrong.
Right.
And he apparently at one point in time is aware enough to know how wrong it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows.
Well, he wasn't completely gone yet, but he was on his way. Remember, this is a few years, 2017. Yeah. This was a few years before his presidential campaign.
In 2021. So he knows he has these. And it's just, it's a total disregard. And now the recording, is that publicly available?
I know that some of the transcript is. Whether or not all of it is, I don't know. I haven't, and only because I haven't looked into it.
All right. Is there anything that you know of specifically in the transcript where it shows his cognitive lapse?
There are a number of moments, yes.
I just wondered if you had any written down that you could describe. It would be very interesting to know. The last thing on this overall general topic is that, Hunter is not the highest quality patriotic person we've got in the country. Just ask his laptop.
Right.
But and I don't know what kind of education he had, but how is it he is the one that energy company in Ukraine wants on their board of directors? Really? What? How is he going to help that company?
Because his money, a lot of it went to the big guy, and the big guy was the vice president. So,
okay, yeah. So it like father, like son, I guess.
Well, you brought it up, and I was thinking this thought. They impeached Trump for a phone call that Trump had that they thought was kind of a
shaky.
Yeah, what's the word I want? Pro quo something. I don't remember what it was. Quid pro quo, where he was trying to get like something for nothing or whatever.
Quid pro quo, yeah.
Quid pro quo. All right, and so they went after him for that. Where you have Biden standing in front of a room of Democrats laughing about how at the Ukraine he told the president, you will fire the guy that's investigating, or I'm not going to give you the money.
Right.
He says, and the guy says, you can't do that. He says, yes, I can. I'm in the airplane. I'm getting ready to leave right now. Do you want the money or not? You're going to fire him or not? And so he explains that laughingly in front of a room of 50 to 100 people. I mean,
he was proud of being a douchebag.
Right. And he's laughing about it, bragging about it.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, you know what happened? He says, they fired him. So he got what he wanted. He used his position and the money and the leverage to interfere internally with the government of another country, got what he wanted, admitted it, and meanwhile, they're trying to stitch it together from a phone call that Trump had as the president talking to another country's president. And, he winds up getting impeached. Again,
I was surprised when he said, well, they fired him. He didn't start beating his chest or something at that point, but that's.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to actually getting the audio and or getting copy of the transcript.
Yeah. Well, I did do a little bit of research while you were talking, and I'll put this out on douglasvgibbs.com after the show. These are specific statements and behaviors from Joe Biden's audio recordings that have been cited as evidence of mental lapses. In one recording, Biden explicitly stated, "Oh gosh, I can't think," when struggling to recall information during conversations with his ghostwriter, Mark Zwanitzer. The tapes contain numerous pauses and ums, and I know we all say but I guess this is beyond the norm, that one critic described as making Biden sound like he's, quote, buffering like a dial-up internet connection, unquote. During discussions about classified documents, Biden appeared confused and said, "It's confusing me," when trying to recall specific details. In one instance, Biden couldn't remember the name of a representative while discussing political matters, despite his long career in government. The recordings show Biden repeatedly losing his train of thought mid-sentence and struggling to maintain coherent narratives about events from his vice presidency. And once again, we lose our train of thought. This is normal as a human creature, animal, especially when you have to stop because someone adds something. I do this all the time. So I want to admit that we do this, but you don't lose train of thought mid-sentence while you're talking. That shows the mental lapse. If let's say I've got a point I want to point out, and my wife says, "Well, and spends 5 minutes talking about something," I might forget where I was at. That's one thing. This guy, while he's speaking, then suddenly mid-sentence, like I am right now, it would be then me going something like, "Oh, well, so who was I talking about? What was that?" In the middle of the sentence. This is where, when you struggle to maintain coherent narratives about events that you should remember, they're important parts of your life, and you're losing thought mid-sentence, there might be something up. Special counsel Robert Hur noted that Biden showed diminished faculties and faulty memory, even though he was sort of an ally during the 2017 recordings, which were conducted approximately 4 years before he became president. And then the tapes reveal Biden occasionally struggling to recall basic names and dates during discussions about foreign policy and his time in office. And these recordings, remember, were part of Special Counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Biden's handling of classified documents, and they were made public after a lengthy legal battle initiated by conservative organizations like Freedom of Information Act requests. Whether or not they've been completely made public, I don't know, but it sounds like they were. I'll see if I can find out. So to get back to your question, absolutely, there is many examples of him, showing his mental lapses. Again, I get it. We all say every once in a while. We all lose our train of thought every once in a while. That's not what this was. This is something way beyond that.
Sounds like when we can get our hands on it, it will be quite the show.
Quite the show, yeah.
And once you and I get our hands on it, what's going to happen?
It'll
Due
vanish.
process and no jumpsuits.
No due process. No jumpsuits. No handcuffs.
I'll take the other side of that, because Doug is, for those who don't know, is working on developing classwork and documents to help people understand and implement the last part of the First Amendment, petition the government for redress of grievances. This is one of those things where, when you have such solid, voluminous information, it makes the petition process pretty easy. And the more people that, once it begins, they start generating their own petitions locally, sending them to Congress, there may be some jumpsuits. But the thing I really have come to like and understand, respect about the fifth item in the First Amendment is that it's really saying that we, the people, get to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And as Doug knows very well and could go on for a while, the petition process didn't begin with the First Amendment. It was there in the colonial days. And if you look at part of the Declaration of
It existed
Independence,
back in Britain even before that,
Yeah.
with the
They were
Saxons. But anyway, continue.
but if you go into the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson writes about everything that they have asked the king to do, and it's just been ignored,
Right.
which means there's this very, very long history prior to the country being founded and after the country being founded of petitioning the government, a government, for redress of grievances. We need to get back to that. And we need to get, and when you have something so very clear and definite, it makes it very simple.
Right.
And just let the listeners know that this is what's coming.
Yeah.
Education.
And I think we're just a couple of weeks away from me getting those materials finished. But so I'll keep you guys posted.
And then get it going, wherever you are, get it going locally, whether it's a local issue or a national issue. This is how we connect with each other. This is how we get to properly, authoritatively, and effectively complain.
And those materials for petitioning the government for redress of grievances will be available to buy as a book through Amazon. And if you're a $9 a month patron at DouglasVGibbs.com, it'll also be made available online to those of you who are patrons. So that's coming up in the near future. One other thing real quick before we move on to the next topic is for those of you who are watching live, be sure to comment in the chat room. It helps also with the algorithm for the show to get it out there more, to get it advertised more, to get it to pop up on people's screens when they're looking for something. And if you watch it later, make sure to leave comments down in the comment section. I not only try to go back to the comments and respond, and if you want me to talk about something, but it's also, once again, good for the algorithms. And of course, be sure to hit follow or subscribe, whether you're at Rumble or YouTube. This show is on both channels. Rumble is, in my opinion, in many ways, the primary, only because YouTube and I sometimes don't always agree on what I should talk about. But we are on both channels. I did have it on BitChute, but there was not enough listeners and too much work for a handful of viewers. So I decided to knock it down to just YouTube and Rumble. Whenever I do these videos, I do them live. The only pre-records I am now doing are the ones with Warhamster on Wednesday mornings on his channel. And, go to rumble.com/Warhamster, capitalize the W and the H in Warhamster, and look for the ones that say the Refederalist Report, and more specifically, Madison's Notes. We are going line by line through Madison's Notes during the Constitutional Convention on his channel. Now, that all said, gentlemen, any more to talk about? Any more that you would like to say, should I say, regarding Biden? Or would you like to move on to the next topic?
Well, I have one last thought about it.
All right.
And it's kind of I don't know what will happen, but let's say all of this finally comes down and he gets dealt with legally, charged, whatever. Is he going to claim the lack of ability to understand, so he can't be charged? Because
and he also believes that, and we'll see how they interpret this. I don't like using that word. That's the reason why I was kind of pausing there. Presidential immunity. There's a number of options he may try to play there. And I mean, we're going to talk about Fauci next, and it's like Fauci, he thinks he has immunity. He thinks he's above it all, and he can just plead the fifth. Turns out he can't, or he shouldn't. We'll see if it legally backfires on him with the processes. Once again, everything has a process, and some of us don't like the fact that the processes take their time. But we'll see. Dennis, sounded like you had one more thing to say as well.
Well, no, I was just thinking, to Alan's point, what was the charge that he was already told that he wasn't going to be charged on because the judge thought that he wasn't cognitive enough to even have a trial?
Was the classified files, having possession of classified files. in his garage and all that jazz. It would be a jury trial, and he's saying that he wouldn't be able to go through the trial, and the jury would just see him as an old man with a poor memory and probably wouldn't go anywhere anyway, kind of thing. So why prosecute? That was basically the attitude. But it was
and the time frame of his mental demise didn't overlap at all.
See, this is roughly 4 years before he became president, and everybody's saying, "Oh no, he was sharp as a tack till the very, very end." Wait a second, 4 years before her is saying, "Oh, he's not capable."
But
before he took office.
What I'm saying is that if he is viewed as not being competent right now, then he can't participate legally in defending himself, which means you can't sue him because he's not competent.
Yeah,
have all his clearances been revoked?
That's another thing to find out.
I sure would hope so. He ought to be stripped of every clearance he has, and maybe his driver's license.
I don't want to see him in a vet. No.
All right, very good. Now, normally at this point, I would start preparing for the mid-show break. I have not developed my break schedule just yet for not being on AM radio. When I was on terrestrial radio, the engineer did it for me.
You could start singing.
No, you don't want that.
And we could go get some water.
Yeah, I couldn't carry a tune if it had a handle. Oh, you can go get water. Okay. I'm more than happy to say go get some water. I'm taken care of. I got my Dr. Pepper, and if I run out, I do have. Yes, I have water. Believe it or not, I do drink water. I'm sure you believe that if I was to fall and break open the skin of my leg, Dr. Pepper would start flowing out or something.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about Fauci. I was going to go. Actually, no, not Fauci yet. I'm sorry. I am jumping the gun. Not Fauci yet. Well, because I want to stick with the hypocrisy thing. So let's say Fauci for next. I want to stick with the hypocrisy thing. So if you guys remember, when it comes to the protesters and the knuckleheads out there, the no kings rallies, right? No king. Trump thinks he's a king. And what we want is no kings. And then the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, appear, and it looks like they're trying to infiltrate, take over, command, dominate the Democratic Party. And they're a part of that no kings kind of development, evolution, whatever. And so no kings. And you hear these DSA people, these socialists, and they say, "Oh, no kings. Trump's a king, and we want it to be for all the people together." That's not what socialism is. That's what socialism claims to be. It claims to be the collective, and it's all of us just evenly. But there is a leadership. There always is. And even when it isn't the leadership, when you do the collective thing, what you're saying is the collective needs to be king. It's still a king. You're just transferring the throne from a king's bottom to yours as a collective, because anybody who disagrees is ruled over. And so this no kings chant that we've heard on college campuses, city squares, political rallies, which has become the signature slogan of the anti-Trump resistance. And we knew let me back up. We knew from the start that these claims were false. And we also knew that it was not some spontaneous. If you look it up with the AI or Google or Bing or whatever, and you look up those No Kings rallies, it will tell you they were spontaneous expression of opposition. Grassroots. There was nothing spontaneous grassroots about it. It was orchestrated and paid for by forces in the shadows. You can, Soros, whatever you want to throw in there. It was carried out by professional protesters paid for by these dark forces that think they're in the shadows. It was a coordinated movement, complete with professionally printed signs, organized marches, social media campaigns featuring celebrities and politicians, solemnly declaring their opposition to monarchical rule. And the rallies grew in size and sophistication, drawing thousands who claimed they genuinely believed they were defending democracy from a would-be tyrant, a would-be king. Yet beneath this passionate display of anti-royal sentiment lies a profound irony. Those who most vociferously denounce kingship are simultaneously constructing the framework for their own centralized authority, proving that the allure of absolute power transcends political ideology, and that the most dangerous monarchies are often those established in the name of preventing them. C.S. Lewis has one of my favorite quotes: "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. The chant 'No Kings' is a rallying cry for progressive activists, Democratic politicians opposing Donald Trump and his vision for America. It is a slogan that is actually a political projection. It claims false ideas about constitutional governance, masking that it is really a defining reality about their own political aspirations. While they decry Trump as a would-be monarch, they simultaneously advocate for a system that would effectively crown themselves through centralized power, ideological conformity, and the dismantling of constitutional checks and balances. The irony is stark. President Trump has actually demonstrated tendencies in the opposite direction of traditional power seekers. He refuses to take for himself the salary of the presidency, has worked to reduce the size of the federal bureaucracy, has sought to return authority to the states on issues like education and abortion. And he has eliminated an unbelievable amount of federal regulations. These are not the actions of someone consolidating power, but rather of someone dispersing it. Precisely the opposite what we'd expect from a king seeking to expand their dominion. A king needs not be an individual. It can manifest as a system, oligarchy, or even tyranny of the majority, which is precisely what the founding fathers feared. The American constitutional system was deliberately designed to prevent any single entity from achieving absolute power, whether that entity be a monarch, a legislature, a judiciary, or even the people themselves in their raw democratic form. James Madison warned in Federalist Number 10 about the mischiefs of faction and how a well-constructed union could control the violence of faction. He understood that pure democracy could become just as tyrannical as monarchy when 51% of the population imposes its will on the remaining 49%. This is why the founders established a republic with multiple layers of representation, separation of powers, and federalism to diffuse power across institutions and jurisdictions. The Democratic Socialists of America and their allies in the Democratic Party reveal their true aspirations through their policy proposals. Their platform calls for abolishing the presidency under the guise of preventing monarchy, eliminating the Senate, described as an undemocratic relic, packing or otherwise neutralizing the Supreme Court, concentrating power in the House of Representatives. This isn't opposition to kingship, it's a plan to relocate the throne. By removing all institutional checks on their power, they seek to establish what might be called an ideological kingdom, where their vision of collectivism reigns supreme. The House of Representatives would become their instrument of rule, granting them absolute control through pure majority rule. The progressive movement has always sought to concentrate power in centralized authorities, whether in Washington or in international bodies. Their opposition to kings is really opposition to any authority that might stand in the way of their own power. They have no principles other than power and their communist dreams, and the way to achieve that power and hold it onto it indefinitely, from their point of view, is pure democracy and dismantling of the system of checks and balances created by the United States Constitution. This pattern of accusing opponents of monarchy while seeking to establish one's own centralized control has historical precedent. During the French Revolution, radicals denounced the monarchy only to establish the Committee of Public Safety, which exercised power even more arbitrarily than the deposed king. And then what followed that was a tyrant, a dictator, Napoleon. In the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks overthrew the Tsar only to create a system with far more persuasive control over individual lives. Tyranny is like any other evil. It does not appear in its true form, but as an angel of light cloaked in the language of liberation. It's George Orwell's observation in his book 1984, where there must always be an enemy, a scapegoat, that is more terrifying than Big Brother's tyranny so as to justify their existence and the continuation of the cause. The progressive movement today follows this pattern of denouncing kings while building their own throne of centralized authority. And the solution of this paradox lies in returning to the founders' vision of a properly limited federal government with meaningful checks and balances. This requires reaffirming federalism. The 10th Amendment must be restored as a meaningful constraint on federal power, returning authority to states and local communities on issues not explicitly delegated to the federal government. Institutional integrity. Rather than abolishing institutions like the Senate and Electoral College, we should restore them to their proper function as deliberative bodies that moderate political passions and protect minority interests. This would entail repealing the 17th Amendment, reversing Reynolds v. Sims, 1964, and restoring the Electoral College to its original core structure, in which the electors are voted into position by congressional district vote and an appointment of each of the two state houses of the legislature, and a pure vote rather than a winner-take-all vote, as we see in all states today, other than Maine and Nebraska. Constitutional constraints. The Constitution must be understood as it was originally intended, as a document that limits government power rather than creates it. As Justice Antonin Scalia often reminded us, the Constitution is not a living document that can be reshaped to fit contemporary preferences. And civic education. Americans must be re-educated about their system of government and why the founders created a republic rather than a democracy. This includes understanding that the purpose of government is to protect pre-existing rights, not to create new ones or redistribute wealth. My book, Repeal Democracy, addresses the difference between a democracy and a republic. The threat to American liberty today comes not from those who seek to reduce the size of government, but from those who would concentrate power in the name of democracy. We must support candidates and organizations committed to constitutional principles and limited government. Educate our fellow citizens about the difference between a republic and a democracy. Defend institutional checks and balances even when they produce outcomes we dislike. Advocate for returning authority to states and local communities wherever possible. The true new No Kings movement is not one that eliminates institutional constraints, but one that embraces them as essential protections for liberty. Only by restoring the constitutional system of diffuse power can we ensure that no single group, whether progressive or conservative, can establish itself as ruler over all others. As Benjamin Franklin reportedly said upon leaving the Constitutional Convention, the Founding Fathers gave us a republic if you can keep it. Keeping it today requires recognizing that the greatest threat to our system comes not from those who seek to reduce government power, but from those who would concentrate it in the name of progress. All right, Alan, what's your thoughts, sir?
I'm blanking on the name of the woman Benjamin Franklin said.
Elizabeth Powell.
Yeah, Elizabeth Powell. She and her husband were big time in the circle of all those people. So when Franklin said that to her, he knew exactly who he was saying it to. And what I found very powerful about that statement is he said, if you can keep it. He didn't say your husband, your brother, your uncle. He said if you can keep it.
Right. He personalized it.
Very personalized. Just to be clear, because you know how slow I am, tell me how many times in the Constitution you'll find the word democracy.
That would be a big goose egg, my friend.
Okay.
0.
Now, the question might be, well, maybe the founders just didn't understand democracy, and that's why they just haphazardly ran over to a republic. That would be incorrect. And I have a few quotes from people that most people have heard of. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read
Please
them.
do.
Okay. John Adams said, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. This is from John Adams to John Taylor, April 1814. Thomas Paine, a democracy is the vilest form of government there is. I mean, the vilest form, love it. Jefferson, democracy is nothing more than mob rule, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the 49%. James Madison. Democracies have been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and in general have been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. This one is just fun. Ambrose Bierce. Democracy is 4 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. I could go on, but when people talk about democracy, I'm not going to get into it.
When a republic is a well-armed sheep contesting the vote.
There you go. There are at least 8 different types of democracy. So when people want to say, I want to save the democracy, my first question is, which one and where is it? Because it's not here in the U.S. Enough of that. So to me, to give you an idea of how long this attack has been going on, let's go back to the 17th Amendment, which you already mentioned. 17th Amendment took the people who were senators at the federal level to a people's vote instead of being appointed by each state's legislature. And my understanding is that each state wanted to have a voice in this new thing they just created called the federal government. That means that they wanted to have, and it turned out 2 per state, regardless of size of state. And these people would be in the federal government representing their state because the state legislature picked them.
Right.
17th Amendment has got to go away. The idea that, separation of powers is a huge idea. Keeping different parts of the government limited. You can't become excessive if you're limited. And this idea that somehow if you want states to have a lot of power, you're crazy. No. Those are the entities that created the Constitution and the very limited form of government. It's just that the federal government has become so unconstitutional for so long that we've gotten used to it being unconstitutional and that it's doing things that it was never given the authority to do in Article 1, Section 8, which is kind of sad because it means the federal government, for me, and you'll correct me, Doug, if I got this wrong, the federal government did not exist until the Constitution was written, ratified, and put into operation, which was March 1789.
Yeah, that's correct, which means that the states are the ones that created the federal government. The federal government is the creation from the Constitution. It did not exist before the Constitution. It exists because of the Constitution.
Which makes the Constitution the birth certificate of the federal government. And you think the federal government would be more respectful of that. And they're not. Okay, if this idea of no kings, okay, I get it. I don't want a monarch. I don't want a dictator. I'm okay with that. But if your alternative is a collective, well, who's going to run the collective? Someone has to run it. It has to be centralized. And when collectives are power is centralized, those rules, the rights are gone. We're now just dealing with rules, and the rules can be changed at will. That's one of the things the founders fought against. No longer will the king or the collective tell us what our rights are. We will decide what our rights are, and they can't tread upon them. They're not, the buzzword is no kings, and I get it, but you're not describing how, because if there's a king, there's a monarchy. Explain to me the monarchy of today.
Well, and the thing is, too, to get a little deeper here, is what they're calling for. And I'm talking about the Democratic Socialists, is communism. And someone says, oh, well, it's communism to get rid of the Senate, get rid of the president, as they're calling for. No, that's not communism. Communism is the control of the means of production. But what getting rid of the Senate and getting rid of the presidency, stuff like that they're calling for does is it secures their power. It better establishes their power. And they know this. They realize this. And as I've explained in other venues, other platforms, we tried that. Under the Articles of Confederation, the president was not a separate individual with executive power. He was the highest ranking member of the legislature. And we had a one-chamber legislature. In other words, we didn't have a Senate. And there was no federal court system, much less a Supreme Court. So all those things that they're demanding, and there was no electoral college. So all those things they are demanding is a new idea, and we need to go to be a better system. That's the way it was under the Articles of Confederation. And that's why we have a constitution. It was failing. It was falling apart. Go ahead.
They went to fix the articles, and they figured out they couldn't fix them.
Right.
The other thing is that, pure communism is not only the ownership. I mean, it's not only, controlling the means of production. It's ownership. That, as we've discussed before, is far left. Far right is anarchy. Just inside far left is fascism, where the means of protection can be privately owned, but they're heavily controlled and regulated. That's fascism. Fascism is not far right. Anarchy is. And the Constitution puts us in between basically the far left and the far right. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and fascism also, fascism is really mercantilism in a sense. That's the same stuff that we fought against Britain regarding in the American Revolution. With your brick wall, by the way, Warhamster in the chat room says, so I haven't seen Alan looks this good in years. So,
well, I shaved.
So Warhamster, welcome to the chat room. Glad you're there. Now, a reminder to all of you guys that are watching live, commenting in the chat room, either at YouTube or at Rumble, and we have had our share of both. Is a good thing. It helps with the algorithm. Also commenting afterwards, or if you're watching the video and you're like, oh, I didn't watch live, I'm not in the chat room, but I have something to say, leave a comment. It's also good for the algorithm. And then, of course, subscribe, follow, depending on which channel you're watching, and hit that little bell at YouTube, and I don't know what it is at Rumble, so that you get notifications when I schedule a show. Because the live shows, while I send out an email hours before, I set up the thing on the platforms less than an hour before. So if you have your bell or whatever on those platforms, you'll get the email telling you shows coming up with less than an hour to go. So if you want a bigger warning, like, oh, I wish I got the emails from Doug, go to douglasvgibbs.com. douglasvgibbs.com. It's right there on your screen. And go all the way to the bottom of that main page, and there is a place for you to join the email list. And then some of my stuff, some of the deeper dives, the longer conversations, or excerpts of my books, or complete copies of my booklets are available to patrons at no cost. Of course, to be a patron, there's a cost, $9 a month. So if you want access to those types of things, become a patron. Hit the join link in the link bar. All right, Dennis, we've talked about the no kings that progressives say they seek, and really all they're doing is adjusting the throne to their collective needs, and to be even more of a king than they ever claim that Trump is supposed to be. And that's what we've been talking about, along with democracy and all of that. What's your thoughts based on what Mr. Allen and I have had to say on this topic, sir?
Well, what you want, what you have here is you have people that want to be in control but don't want to be known. That's basically what you want, and they wind up getting puppets that are the figureheads for supposedly being the guys in power. But they aren't. They're just taking their orders, marching orders, from this posse of the elites, or whatever you want to call them. And this goes back centuries. You can talk about the Illuminati if you want to talk about them. You can talk about the Bilderbergers. You can talk about the Davos crowd. You can talk about the Council on Foreign Relations. You can talk about the David Kennedys, who freely admitted, that they were in association trying to steer and control the government, from their own place. Freely admitted that. I've got that quote. I don't have it in front of me, but, you've heard it before. You can go all the way back to, the 1700s, where you got the Rothschilds and him taking his sons and sending them around Europe to where they handled all the banks. So you've got international banking, which has great control over governments. They are the backbone of the Federal Reserve, which Alan loves. Anything I say, Alan can give you great detail on. I'm just kind of being a generalist here. But you have, in a phrase that I will use, you have secret societies. And
matter of fact, Warhamster, the chat room, he's done some shows about that stuff over at his channel, rumble.com/Warhamster, capitalize the W and the H. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you got these secret societies that some of them are formal, many of them are maybe less formal. I mean, the elites that gather in Davos, do they march in step with one another? Probably 80-90%, and that's more than enough to carry sway. They figure out what the world agenda is going to be, what the world economy is going to be. They figure out what they want the price of gold to be at, what the demand on oil is going to be, who's going to supply the oil. Their hand is on the tiller of the economies of the world, but they don't want to know. They don't want people to know that their hand is there.
Right.
The BRICS that showed up at the Antifa riots 4, 5, 6 years ago, the BRICS that just happened to be on a pallet. They just happened to be around the corner from where the soon-to-be riot was going to be. That company was owned by a company that owned back to Warren Buffett. Now,
yeah, and they hide in plain sight. Those what they do. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, Warren Buffett make the decision to drop the bricks off so that the Antifa people could have it and throw it through, the offices and buildings of businesses and governments? Did he make that executive decision somewhere in some boardroom? Probably not. But it's just interesting to me, not coincidental. That's kind of my theme today, that when you back everything up, the ballots that showed up out of New York that wound up, being counted, in 4 or 5, 10 states away, they were put on a truck. Somebody paid the truck driver. Somebody planned it. Somebody did the ballots, So there ought to be connecting a dot here. That you're talking about these paid rioters. Who's paying them? Who's busting them in? Chain of command. It goes back to somebody. And those people don't want to be known. You got Bill Gates that's involved in all kinds of shenanigans, that are contrary to the will of the people, contrary to the health of the people. And he just tap dances lightly as he allows pictures being taken of him as he's in Africa with a syringe in his hand. I don't know where he went to nursing doctor school to be able to be qualified to give somebody a shot, but there he is. So like you say, there's a king has a name, a president has a name, a king is ordained by God, supposedly. A president is elected by the people, by the electoral college, by however you want to say it's morphed into something. And you have people behind the strings trying to undo that representative government, trying to stop the we the people into we the associations, we the corporation, we the secret society, we the whatever you want to call them. I don't know, but I know who they are. I mean, I could probably give you a piece of paper with 100 names on them, 50% of which are in the headlines all the time. And to me, they ought to be arrested for treason and taken out and shot after they're found guilty. But they tap dance and they get away with it because due process doesn't give due justice.
Everything's a
and
process.
they hide behind it. They hide behind the process. So, Alan keeps saying that, people need to write an email and do all of this, and they do. And they get the information from Freedom of Information Acts. He wants to read the stuff that you were talking about today. You can give him the transcripts of whatever you have. But when we all have it, and the people that are elected that are supposed to, bring the charges and prosecute the guilty, when the district attorneys are being paid for by Soros, when the Secretary of States are being paid for by Soros, you're not going to get a fair election, and you're not going to get due diligence and on law enforcement. You're going to get a tap dance.
Tyranny, though, unfortunately, is not usually very bright. They always eventually get found out. The problem is sometimes the tyranny runs so deep that even those who are supposed to be against the tyranny have a hand in it somewhere. And so they delay, or they're careful, or they don't want to, go after this person because it might bounce back on them or something like that. And so I totally get all that. And, watching Fauci's Fifth Amendment charade.
Well, what was it, 156 times?
111 is what I have.
111?
It may have been more. I don't know, but I have a count of 111. I mean, you want to talk about constitutional theater of the highest order, man. My wife and I are watching this, and Josh Hawley was brilliant in how he, illustrated in plain view how ridiculous it was. And then Joe Scarborough, I think it was, comes on making fun of Josh because he's missing the point. Maybe he's not, but the leftist media did not talk about it, and when they did, it was in defense of Fauci. And oh my gosh, poor old guy. This guy should be, I agree with you, in handcuffs, in an orange jumpsuit, behind bars for crimes against humanity. And we've known this since day one. I thought in December of 2019, I may have gotten COVID because, when it was first kind of coming out, because I had a respiratory infection. Then again, it could have been the flu. Who knows? But once it became the deal in 2020, I didn't wear a mask. I didn't get any shots. I didn't get it. I'll get to that in a minute. So we have these lockdowns, the mandates that were made up. I'm going to use a term that'll especially thrill Alan, made up out of thin air, and we have these shots that I believe are causing the disease. And you've got the guy behind it, and he thinks he's not only above the law and not reachable, above anybody's reach, but then he's getting this kind of celebrity kind of treatment, and he is bathing luxuriously in it. And we're talking about Anthony Fauci. And now his diary, how stupid do you have to be? Well, I mentioned how tyranny can be stupid. How stupid do you have to be to keep your diary on government servers? That's why they got their hands on it. It wasn't somewhere on his computer and like Hunter's computer type thing where they found his laptop and pulled it out. No, he kept his diary on government servers. I'm talking about the former COVID czar, Dr. Anthony Fauci. And he was enjoying, according to his entries, near universal media adoration. And he was eating it up. But now he finds himself in the crosshairs of congressional scrutiny. And as Senator Josh Hawley brilliantly exposed, Fauci's legal strategy may contain a fatal flaw that could blow up in his face. Fauci is in a situation. He got pardoned, so he believes he don't have to say anything. If he says anything, it could be used against him. Maybe with a state case. If he says nothing, I'll get to that. If he lies, he committed perjury. His pardon doesn't cover that. So the central issue here is straightforward. Biden issued a broad retroactive pardon, so Fauci's like, they can't get me. I can not say a word and just ride out this wave and nothing's going to happen. I am golden. This retroactive pardon to Fauci was in the final hours of President Biden's presidency. And as Warhamster has asked me, maybe it was done by autopen. If it was done by autopen, then it wasn't his signature and it would not be valid, in my opinion. But nonetheless, if the pardon is indeed valid, if it ostensibly shields him from, as it says, any offenses against the United States he may have taken part in related to COVID-19, then the pardon is his enemy. It creates a constitutional contradiction that Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley, a Yale Law School graduate and former Missouri Attorney General, skillfully exploited. This is what Hawley said, and he's exactly right. You don't have any rights under the Fifth Amendment because you've been pardoned. He cited the Supreme Court's 1896 decision in Brown v. Walker. It's basically using dicta from that case. There's no case that really defines what he's trying to say per se, but the legal principle is clear. If a witness has been pardoned for potential offenses, he may not stand upon his privilege against self-incrimination. It's just basic logic. This Fifth Amendment protects individuals from being compelled to provide testimony that could incriminate themselves. If Fauci has already been pardoned, for any potential offenses related to his pandemic response, then there is literally no risk of self-incrimination. So the constitutional purpose of the Fifth Amendment protection then is nullified by the pardon itself, because the purpose of remaining silent is not to self-incriminate. If you've been pardoned, you can't self-incriminate, so therefore you must speak. By not speaking, then, he's committing a different crime, contempt of Congress, maybe obstruction. By repeatedly invoking the Fifth Amendment to avoid answering even the most mundane questions, such as what day it was or what color tie he was wearing or the color of the carpet, Fauci wasn't exercising a constitutional right. Hawley points out that there is no risk of self-incrimination. Refusing to answer congressional questions transforms from a protected constitutional act to a criminal offense, contempt of Congress. The absurdity reached its peak when Hawley began asking these questions. I thought was brilliant. What color are you wearing? What color of the carpet in front? When he asked about the carpet, for a moment, Fauci looked down at the carpet like he was going to answer. And then one of the members of the army of lawyers he had with him from behind taps him on the shoulder. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. Now, his primary lawyer got kicked out, but he had a whole army of lawyers behind him. Go ahead.
What happens then? In effect, he is undoing his pardon. He's pretending it doesn't exist because Hawley's telling him, you've been pardoned. You know, the purpose of the Fifth Amendment is so you don't get convicted of something based on self-incrimination. You can't force a person to testify against himself. You can't force a wife to testify against a husband. You know, you can't force an attorney to reveal classified information in the attorney-client privilege. There's a certain amount of sacredness that these things all carry. And the sacredness of his pardon, he is now throwing away by saying that he doesn't believe in the pardon because he's more concerned about being convicted through self-incrimination of something that maybe the pardon didn't cover, of something that maybe the pardon wrongfully covered, you know, but you can't have it both ways.
Well, his lawyers are arguing there is a threat of self-incrimination. What they've basically said is that, first of all, that that he may be facing legal challenges from states. The states can sue him, and his pardon doesn't cover the states. And so anything he says, if he were to say something, could be used against him. Also, he's saying that if he does say something, also, any false statements he may make could potentially expose him to perjury charges. And so, and his pardon wouldn't cover new offenses committed during his testimony. And so by staying silent, he doesn't run the threat of perjury. This is what his lawyers are saying. I'm not necessarily saying.
I know, but basically they're saying they don't trust him. He's not smart enough to be able to answer a question because he can't speak the truth because he doesn't know the truth. And if he gives his opinion and his opinion is wrong, they can charge him with, perjury or whatever it is, whoever wants to prove what the truth is that is different than what he was saying. So, this is like this is like Biden. You can't talk about anything with him because he's not smart enough to answer anything.
Well, once again, they're trying to play the legal game, and they're trying to use everything they can to protect them. And it's like, my first thought is, well, if you're not guilty, what are you worried about? If you are
if you're worried about all this stuff,
you're going around, go ahead.
You should have never taken the job if you're afraid of what might happen to you during the job. He wants no harm, no foul on anything he ever did.
Well, yeah, but he believes he's above it all anyway. I mean, he's a god in his own mind. Or as a joke goes, a legend in your own mind. And he was excited. You could tell in his diary that everybody was recognizing him as such. And he's got this one where he's excited with Julia Roberts about gasp when he was on with her, and stuff like that. And this is his mindset. And the ultimate irony is that Biden's attempt to protect Fauci has basically boxed him into a legal corner. By accepting the pardon, regardless of his lawyer's arguments, Fauci eliminated his Fifth Amendment protections while simultaneously creating a political firestorm that is only intensifying under congressional scrutiny. Josh Hawley, excuse me, and I've always liked Senator Josh Hawley, but he summarized it perfectly. Quote, "The only problem is that Fauci doesn't have Fifth Amendment protection anymore. President Biden pardoned him in the final hours of his term, which means that Fauci cannot legally stand upon this privilege because there's no self-incrimination, so therefore he has to talk. Otherwise, then he's incriminating himself, and he's going to do no matter what, the guy should do jail time, be it the state's pursuing legal action, contempt of Congress, perjury, and ultimately, and once again, I'll bring this up because Warhamster's brought this up to me in other venues. You got the auto pin. Biden didn't actually sign that pardon, so is it even legal? But this constitutional standoff, it reveals the dangers of using presidential power as a political shield. What was intended as a get-out-of-jail-free card has instead become a legal straitjacket, potentially transforming Fauci from a protected witness into a congressional contempt defendant. And the spectacle of his Fifth Amendment invocation constantly represents more than just another partisan hearing. It demonstrates how constitutional principles are being twisted by these political knuckleheads to try to override legal reasoning. And Hawley's constitutional takedown exposes the fundamental flaw in Fauci's strategy. You cannot simultaneously accept a pardon for potential offenses while claiming protection against self-incrimination for those same offenses. And as this drama unfolds, one thing is certain: the legal and political fallout from Fauci's testimony will continue to reverberate long after the hearing ends. And if Hawley's constitutional analysis proves correct, Fauci's attempt to shield himself behind the Fifth Amendment may have inadvertently opened the door to the very legal jeopardy he's trying to avoid. The rule of law demands accountability, and I know you believe this, even for those who have operated above it for years. But in this case, constitutional principle, political accountability, they might be finally aligning, much to Fauci's detriment. The fear is, and this is where I'm going to hand it over to you again, is that regardless of everything we know, he admitted to it in his diary, all of it, that he still won't spend a day in jail. That's the fear. And he should. Go ahead, sir.
Me?
Well, I was saying Dennis, because I have a feeling he had something to say about that.
Let
but
him,
I can.
Well,
no, let him go.
I just have more frustration. I'll just hold my tongue and let Alan, wax eloquent.
Thank you.
And Warhamster asked in the chat room, he says, well, wait a second. So the question has never been educated is whether you can pardon a person or just pardon a specific crime. Well, you're supposed to pardon a person regarding a specific crime, but not pardon a person about anything. That was the constitutional intent. I wrote a very long, I think it's like over 4,000 word, basically journal type article at the website, douglasvgibbs.com. You can get there by going to politicalpistachio.com. But this deep dive requires you to be a patron. So if you want to read it, you need to be a patron. I'll probably go over it on one of my shows. So either pay attention to my shows or become a patron. But go ahead, Alan. What's your thoughts?
Very many. Why keep a diary? And we've talked about this, and I'm thinking the fact that he kept it in a manner that was accessible,
right,
was really dumb. But
yeah, I mean, you keep your diary on a government. So I don't even keep a diary. I mean, I kept journals here and there when I was younger, but I don't know. To me, a diary is kind of a self-serving, narcissistic kind of thing, or at least for a man. I mean, ladies are different, because they want to share their feelings or whatever. But
it depends what's what's behind the diary. If it's a
Right.
travel diary, you're keeping track of all the places you saw,
Okay,
things you
I
did.
get that. Okay.
But
Yeah.
he's in the middle.
Leave a guy who loves spreadsheets to say something like that. But all right,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
He something clear, concise, and succinct. Yes. I'm thinking that he kept this diary in the middle of all this activity. It's way of self-gloating. Look at what I got done. Look at what's really going on. Look at how stinky I am. The fact that he would actually keep one, it's going to be great to read. Another question I had is that he apparently received a last day pardon from Biden. I would ask the question, why would he need a pardon?
Right. Well, if you're not guilty, why do you need the pardon? A. B. This broad sweeping, really, that's what the pardons were created for? Let's go back to founders. No, that's not what they were created for. These broad, and I mean, and this idea, it began with Ford doing it for Nixon. Well, going to pardon Nixon for anything he may or may not have done regarding Watergate. I mean, that kind of was the precedent they were kind of pulling from.
Still not right.
And where we go one, we go all. And the GTG, I'm like, yes, that means go Trump go, but I don't know. Biden wasn't a legitimately elected president. Shouldn't that fraud vitiate all? And that's that's kind of a good point. That's not the way the processes work. Unfortunately, legal processes. It happened, but there are Supreme Court cases that do say that if something was illegal in the first place, then it vitiates anything that has to do with that. So I agree. Where we go one, we go all. The GTG, but that's a good question. But then again, there's another good question. Once again, going back to kind of my conversations with Warhamster, if A, should a pardon be for just the person doing anything or something specific, and B, was the pardon even legitimate in the first place because it was with an auto pen, it wasn't by his hand, and therefore it was his staff, and his staff does not have the authority to pardon. Only he does. And the auto pen is for things like, you're going to send out 100 letters to all the different, little league teams that did really well or something. Then that I get that. But for something that's official in that manner, it's not just some resolution type of thing. You got to have the actual hand by the actual president. And so in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the pardon is not legitimate in the first place anyway, not only because he's not a legitimate president, because Trump won the presidency 3 times, basically, but also because of the auto pen. All right, continue, Alan, please.
Well, if the pardon was created or signed by the auto pen, which means it's not valid, then all the Fifth Amendment statements are valid. It seems what has to be done is, was the pardon created legally, lawfully, correctly? Yes or no? If yes, then the Fifth Amendment statements stand. If no, then they don't. We got to go step by step. And the other is that whether he gets jail time or not, orange jumpsuit or not, I see the diary as being incredibly damning, and that will absolutely negatively impact him for the rest of his life. But the audacity to document what appears to be all the lies, all the misstatements, all the wrangling, and then gloating about it, that's a disturbed mind. Very disturbed.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And when it comes to Fauci and again, I mentioned this earlier, I didn't wear a mask. My wife wore a mask at work only because she faced termination if she didn't. We didn't stay home. We didn't get the jab. We didn't play the 6 feet social distancing game. I had 2 Constitution classes weekly, each with at least a dozen students. I attended church every Sunday at a packed venue where nobody wore masks. We dined at restaurants that refused to comply with the mandates. We traveled to Yuma, Arizona, and St. George, Nevada at different times. Matter of fact, St. George a few times for weekend getaways because we knew those locations remained largely mask-free. And neither one of us contracted COVID. And, one of my sister-in-laws contacts me one time. She says, let me get this straight. You and Virginia didn't wear masks. You didn't receive the vaccine. You didn't get COVID. And I said, right. She's like, oh, well, Mom and I wore masks all the time, got all the shots of boosters, and we both came down with COVID 3 times. And then I was, asking even during this stuff, well, where's the bodies in the streets? If this is the type of thing we see in the movies, as we're being told, Stephen King's The Stand, where's the bodies in the streets? Every death is happening in the hospitals. Now, people died, and I'm not making light of that. And I have friends of mine who have loved ones who died or friends who died. But it was obvious that the numbers were being padded, and it was obvious that the deaths were after people were in the hospital. Was it the remdesivir? Was it the respirators? My theory is that the creation and release of the COVID virus was done deliberately by China and members of the Trump-hating deep state who are willing to do whatever it took to ensure a distraction large enough to influence the 2020 election, divert attention from the fraudulent activities committed by those still angry that Donald Trump had derailed their plans when he beat Hillary Clinton 4 years earlier. But the problem is that the virus wasn't as deadly as they had hoped. But they played the game as originally intended. They drummed up the panic. They acted like it was. And then they found a way to drum up the numbers, and they lied. They padded things or whatever. And I mean, and he knew these things. He knew that the mandates weren't working. He knew that the wet market origin theory was a myth, that it came out of a lab. And he knew that it came out of a lab because he had been working with that lab. They had been doing the gain of function way back. And if you want to get really technical, there was even, I'm trying to remember, 2018 diffuse proposal. I mean, it basically laid out the blueprint of what they were going to do. If you look at it, he set the process for the COVID origins argument. He was intimately involved in managing its publication. He destroyed evidence, encouraged others to do so. He testified under oath that the National Institutes of Health never funded gain-of-function research, which is basically altering the pathogen's ability at the Chinese Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yet, and he lied. There's a documented funding trail confirming that the NIH was indeed providing this funding. And, the list goes on and on and on. When we talk about this, this gain of function research, I mean, basically what they were doing is they were inserting spike protein. There were things with this virus that was not naturally consistent.
Couldn't happen on its own.
So they were engineering viruses. They were manufacturing viruses. They were playing this game. Go ahead. What was that?
I'm saying, the virus could never have done this on its own.
No.
They were trying to engineer it, as you said. The purpose of successfully engineering this, there is no good purpose for it. So why was it being funded unless it was going to be weaponized? And I want to go back when you and Alan were talking. You were talking about the pardon, and Alan was saying, well, if the pardon was real, then no Fifth Amendment. If the pardon isn't real, out of pen or for whatever reason, too broad, illegal, then him taking the Fifth, does make sense. And I'm sitting here, all this is going on real time, and nobody ever knows what the facts are. Nobody knows what the truth
Well,
is.
and the fact is, who cares about all that stuff? The guy committed crimes against humanity.
Well, I know, but I want to go back all the way back to Bill Clinton when he asked the question, what is the meaning of the word is, right?
Yeah, it depends on what the definition of is, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you cannot define anything anymore, and that's what the left is trying to do, is confuse, obfuscate, just, make things to where nothing is predictable, nothing is accountable. Going back to Ketanji Brown, whatever her name is, on the Supreme Court, define what a woman is. I mean, nobody can do anything anymore, and there's no accountability.
Right.
Okay,
and that disaster of non-accountability goes through the courts, and justice weeps, and they get away with it, and they get more bold with it, and they just, like I say, they're sitting there laughing at the fact that you can't get to me because I have this barrier to the truth.
I think you said the key word there.
The truth is what makes you free.
Right.
So we can't have truth.
I'm going to answer Dennis's question about
All right,
is.
go ahead, Alan.
Is a verb, specifically the third person singular present tense form of the verb be. It's used to show existence, identity, or a state of being. I think we now know what is means.
Yeah, but to him it meant that's my excuse to weasel out of things. I will play games with language. I will play games with language. Oh, and by the way, I'll play games with language.
Well,
I'm not saying that the truth can't be known. I'm saying that the truth is known, and they obfuscate to where the truth cannot be used against anybody.
Our allies go, okay, nothing we can do about it, I guess. As they drink from the same trough.
Yeah. One thing, because you guys mentioned a lot of specifics about back in the day, when and I imagine this came from the federal government, and under what constitutional authority, Doug, could the federal government pay a hospital amount of money if somebody came into them and they tested positive? Then they get a payment for entering the hospital. Then they get a payment for being on a respirator, and then they get a payment if the person dies.
Right.
Is that constitutional to make those payments?
The federal government? No.
Okay.
It's a domestic thing. It's none of their business anyway.
And
on top of the fact that it was obvious that they were doing whatever they could to pad the numbers.
Right.
Including pad the numbers for us, and we'll pay you for it. Basically,
exactly. If you go back to the pandemic, the real one, 1918, 1919, things were so bad, even in this country, that, because I've read about it, that
talk about the Spanish flu.
Yeah, that if somebody died in their home, they might be there for a couple of days before anybody could pick them up. Right. And in some towns, the body count, because you were talking about body count, the body count, and this is not laughable, it's very sad, very serious. The body count was so high, the way they dealt with them is they just did mass graves.
Right.
But there's that M word again, mandate. Where in the Constitution is any federal entity given a power to issue a mandate?
Well, but they knew this. That's the reason why they played games with it. There was no law issued, so therefore, hey, no, it was just a recommendation.
They didn't treat it.
That's the language they used. Oh, well, and who were the enforcers? They didn't have to enforce it. We did. Businesses did.
They were told.
Local health departments did.
Yeah.
So technically, the federal government didn't do anything other than say, well, this is the way it ought. I'm trying to remember. There was a speech that
they paid.
No. The word was you would heed. So Governor Newsom, in a speech, says, you will heed these recommendations.
Right.
He knew what he was saying. If you look up the word heed, it did not mean order. You have to follow it as law. Heed means take serious these recommendations. That's what heed means.
Yeah.
They knew what they were saying. They made sure they used language so that you could never say, well, you ordered us to. It was by law. There was no law. And while we use the word mandate, that was not technically a mandate. They were suggestions. They played games with the language as they always do, and that's their out. You know, and it's just like with the violence from the left. Their rhetoric is creating this violence. Well, we never told them to actually be violent. See, we're okay. But their language and what they're saying and the rhetoric they're saying is encouraging that violence. Well, we didn't. It's like a kid, you know, when you catch them red-handed. Well, I didn't technically have that in my hand. You know, I mean, you know, that's the game they play. And you got Fauci, who was the lead dirtbag in all of that, with his deep state connections, using the intelligence community and media and political office holders to influence the narrative, presenting these lies, convincing everybody to follow these mandates, and then sit there on TV. So I never actually said that. Yeah, you did. And he was the one driving force behind all of this. And then you read his diary, and it was exciting to him. His own hubris, his desire for glory and recognition. He bathed in the limelight. He was giddy about the worship he was receiving. His desire for recognition. So it's not just that he's a dirtbag. He committed crimes against humanity. He was relishing it. And he knew it was a lie. He knew that what he was saying publicly and what he privately was saying or privately believing were two different things, and it excited him. And he was, and these diary entries, emails, whatever you want to call them. There's some emails that show this too, where he was repeatedly soliciting scientists with long-standing financial relationships with NIAID, and he's asking them to nominate him for prestigious and potentially lucrative awards. Do you ask someone to, hey, make sure you go out of your way to make sure I get that award? You ever heard anybody ever doing that? I've gotten a couple of awards in my life, and it's very cool when it happens. I didn't even know they were coming because I'm not sitting there. Oh, no, don't forget, make sure you nominate me for an average normal, but this guy was relishing it. And his taxpayer-funded staff was supplying and helping prepare the nomination materials, which is, by the way, also illegal. And churches were being threatened from meeting. Schools were being shut down. And then he says on TV, well, I had nothing to do with closing schools. But when we got records, we got conversations. He talked to New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio about shutting down schools. He talked to Gavin Newsom's chief of staff about shutting down schools. He said it on TV. Well, I never said that. And he publicly lied about the virus's fatality rate too. We were talking about this the other day, Alan. You know, telling the public it was 2 to 2.5% risk. And then he privately recorded in his diary, 0.2%, 0.3% risk of contagion. People dying in the hospitals, remdesivir, ventilators. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin worked, but President Trump said they worked, so therefore they said those were no good to destroy Trump. They were willing to let people die or get sicker, be miserable, ruin people's lives for their power. That's what they did with January 6th. That's what they did with COVID. It's the same thing.
You lost your job.
Ruin people's lives. Yeah. Ruin people's lives for power. And this is where I get, spitfire mad. And I start to understand and kind of lean in the direction of Dennis. Where are the handcuffs and the orange jumpsuits? Because it's not just that they're running lives for their power. It's in our face. We see it. And while I believe in processes, I understand due process is important. All the processes are important. You got to gather the evidence. It is frustrating because they act like they're just now discovering something I knew 5 years ago. That's where I get really ticked off. It's the top of the hour, gentlemen. So we are at the end of Constitution Radio. This is, for those of you who are not familiar, a show that was on radio for 15 years. July 4th, 2026 was the final episode. We migrated over here to rumble.com and youtube.com, both of them, /Douglas V. Gibbs. If you enjoy the program, let us know. If you don't enjoy it, tell somebody else. If you love it, tell lots of people. But understand, I am a radio guy, so yeah, you're not going to get the 5-minute, 2-minute, 50-second shorts from me. But and Alan and Dennis has been with me for a large portion of that ride on AM/FM radio, and they have elected to join me here on these platforms. And we want now to grow this bigger than it was on AM/FM radio. At one point, you could say we had at least 20,000 listeners, perhaps more. I've heard even bigger numbers thrown at me. That's how many subscribers I want. I want 50,000 subscribers, and it takes you to help us get that. So definitely share this, talk about it, comment, subscribe. Dennis, any final words before we say adios?
No, I think I've said my piece. Other than coincidences aren't what they appear to be.
Well, and don't forget that in the Hebrew language, there is no word for coincidence.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there is no word for coincidence in Hebrew. Says something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
All right, Alan, plug yourself and your final words.
Well, thank you for letting me be here. It's great to chat with you and Dennis. And you can find me on the web, FedEd, FEDED.us, for basic monetary system education. And most Sundays on Patriot Soapbox, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time for the Republic. Thank you for letting me be here today.
It's a pleasure. And I am Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com, Mr. Constitution. Definitely visit my site, become a patron member, or read the blog. I blog just about every day. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Thanks for spending the time with me. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.